Hey folks, I'm going to actually do a little painting here with the paintboard and tell a story. I know you're waiting on the bus, but feel free to gather around and listen if you want to. Bus may show up, I may be preaching to nobody, but I want to tell a story here. And it's a pretty well-known story that you probably all know about. It's something that happened in history, and it involves one of the biggest and most beautiful ships of its kind that was ever built. In fact, they actually made a movie about this a few years ago, and this ship was the biggest and most glorious of its day. And the construction was completed in 1912, and it was ready to make its maiden voyage from London, England, all the way over across the Atlantic to New York City. And it was said that this ship was so well built that it couldn't sink. In fact, some even said that God himself couldn't sink this ship. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody? What ship am I? It's a famous story. The Titanic. Good job. The Titanic. You guys know the story. Okay? This ship was the first sailing was booked out. All the tickets were sold. And this was actually wealthy people. Not just any old person could get a ticket on this ship. You had to have a lot of money. These were some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the world. Okay? They booked a ticket from England to New York. Okay? Now, in doing so, they didn't have any worries as that ship crossed the icy waters of the North Atlantic. That time of year could be some pretty dangerous waters, but they didn't have any worries because they had entrusted something to the captain of that ship. These people had entrusted what to the captain? Their life. Okay? They entrusted their life to the captain of that ship. Who knows how many people were on that ship? Anybody got a clue? Anybody got a guess? How many people were on board the Titanic when it left? Somebody give me an estimate. 2,000? You're close. There was 2,000. 24 passengers on that ship, and they all entrusted their life to the captain. Now, I'm going to tell you something about the Titanic today that you probably don't know. So listen, who can tell me what it was that sunk the Titanic? Ice. Ice? An iceberg? That's not exactly true, believe it or not. Yeah. That's pretty much right. But there's something beyond that actually sank. You know, what most people don't know is the captain was warned that night that there were icebergs ahead. But he didn't change his course. And the reason he didn't change his course was something most of the passengers didn't know about. Secretly, he had an ulterior motive. He had one opportunity to get a name for himself. He was captaining the biggest and most glorious ship in the world. And he thought that he could set a world speed record for crossing the Atlantic between England and the United States. And he'd be a famous captain after that. He'd have a job for life. And so he wanted to take the shortest route possible through the North Atlantic. And he was going to get to New York as fast as he could. So the captain was warned about icebergs. And believe it or not, he plowed through one iceberg. Okay, see it. He didn't stop. The ship ran over a second iceberg. Okay? Right there in the North Atlantic. And it didn't end with that. He finally hit the iceberg. The third iceberg is what created a 300-foot gash in the side of that boat. And then that boat started to fill with water. And then it began to sink. And there was nothing they could do to stop it. Now, there were 2,200 people on board that ship. But there weren't lifeboats for all of them. In fact, there weren't enough lifeboats to save hardly any of them. Why would you need lifeboats? You had a ship that even God couldn't sink, is what the people said. Why would you need a lifeboat? Okay? That night, as the ship sunk, some were put in boats, some were saved, but many people died. A trip for pleasure and enjoyment actually became a trip of something else. It became a trip of death for quite a few people. You guys know how many people died on the Titanic? It was 1,500 people died. You know that 1,500 people died on that ship. There was nothing that could be done. Now back in England, this was before the days of news media and the televisions and the newspapers. And news stopped very slowly. But people heard the ship sunk and that many had been saved and some had been lost at sea. And so they gathered around a public square in London, and they had a piece of, the people that were being informed had a piece of chalk and drew a chart on the paper. And the chart told people those passengers that were known to be, one column was for those passengers known to be lost, or there was another column that talked about those passengers who were known to be saved. As word came back about family or loved ones, their names were put on one side of the chart if they were known to perish. Their names were put on the other side of the chart if they were saved, and people found out, you know, did my friend die? Did my family die on that ship? Were they lost or were they saved? Now I want to get back to what I said before. I told you I'd tell you something about the Titanic that most people don't know. What was it that sunk this ship? Most people would say an iceberg. I told you he didn't run over one, he ran over 3 icebergs. He didn't learn his lesson. But I'll still make you think that it wasn't icebergs that sunk that ship. No, friends, it was something else. Something that's very alive and real even today. It was the pride of that captain that sunk that ship. He cared more about setting a speed record than he did the safety of his route, his crew. And ultimately, the pride was the demise of that entire ship. Okay? Now, let's just imagine for a moment that you were on the Titanic. I've got a little person in here. Yeah. Let's say you were on that Titanic as it was sinking, and there wasn't space for you in the lifeboat. You knew you were going to die. What would you be thinking about at that moment? You're not going to be thinking, where's my wallet? You're not going to be thinking, dang, I'm going to miss the episode of American Idol tonight. You're not going to be thinking, oh man, I gotta get home. I'm running out of money. You're not going to be thinking of anything like that. You're going to be thinking about something else. You see, the people that died that night bought a ticket for New York, but what they actually got was a ticket to somewhere else. It was a ticket to eternity. They had entrusted that captain of the ship with their lives. What they got instead was death. I made the argument that it wasn't the iceberg that sunk the Titanic, it was the pride